Good afternoon. It is 11:02 and it's Friday, October 18th, 2024 and 11 o'clock. And this is the special board meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. Let's do a roll call of commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm commissioner for District 1 and president of the board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
We are all present. Our next item is the agenda review. And do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, we would like to add a non-rep title and salary table for discussion to today's meeting.
Okay. So do you want that before or after, or do you want it in the agenda?
If we could get it before, it's just a quick.
Okay. So do it first thing before the presentation. Okay.
Yes, please.
Do we have a motion to accept the modified agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of approving the modified agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. We have approved the modified agenda. Fire away. Oh, and before we totally get going, I just want to check in on, do we have any hard stop times today?
Yeah, I do.
What-
So I need to be off about 5 minutes before 1.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to time check. Please proceed, Kevin.
And Will is going to bring it up on the screen. We need to add a new position to our non-rep title and salary table. This table is going to get modified in the coming weeks, but this is taking a little bit of a fast turn. We're proposing to add a title and salary range for an IT systems administrator. This person would help with not only PUD work, but we would have the port part-time at the port. So this position would be split. It'd be very beneficial to the PUD, be beneficial to the port. At present, they contract out their IT administration, and this is just a way to work together where we're not quite ready for a full-time FTE, but you know, people are on vacation, a lot of things happening that needed positions. So this is a first touch. We will bring it back next regular scheduled board meeting. It'll be on the agenda, or if there's no real questions, we can put it in the consent agenda.
So I have a question. So we have several IT people. Is this kind of, as you normally think of, a person who's assisting the people we already have, or how can you kind of describe the work that they would do
So
compared to what
this,
we have now?
and Ryan's on, but you know, we have Chris and Ryan. This is kind of a person in the middle.
Okay.
So that they can help with the administration, again, not only of our network, but the ports.
Okay. Ken or Dan, any questions? Do we have questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Ken, didn't see that.
So Kevin, is this the total salary, or is this our half of the salary?
This is the total salary, and the range is between 86, I think, and 120. And, you know, roughly it would be, depending on experience, on what range that half would be for us and half would be for the port.
So this is more of an administrative position than a technical position.
It is a combination, kind of go between.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do we have any, do we anticipate further questions on this one, or do we want to just send it to consent agenda next time?
I don't have any questions.
I'm okay with it also. How about you, Ken?
I'm good.
All right. Is there gonna be a job description, or how is that?
We do have a job description, and I can have Melanie attach it. So-
Yeah, I'd say send that out and then maybe also just put it in the consent agenda packet. And if for any reason we have any questions, we can always pull it just to ask questions. But
And if there's any questions at all, it's a short topic, we can.
for now, just put it in the consent agenda and just
Great.
provide
Yeah.
if we have questions, we can pull it out. If not, it'll be approved.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Are we on to the presentation on the project plan work update?
We are on to the presentation.
Okay.
Oh, it's over there. I keep looking on this screen for it.
One there, one there.
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong screen, waiting for something to come up. I
I
apologize.
just want to double check and then the members online view the slides.
Yes,
Okay, and really, this is the first of several meetings we will have. It's a discussion primarily with the board, but the public is more than welcome to jump in because it really does affect our long-range planning, how we're looking at things.
And the date on this is July 30th. It was presented at a board meeting back
No.
then. It wasn't? That's just a
No.
wrong date.
Just the recycling slide.
Okay, well, I guess I thought I had seen it before, so,
No.
okay.
Today we'll cover three topics: timelines, understanding our funding and priority settings. What we're trying to do here, next slide. I need to,
Sorry, I was doing two things.
yeah, and I didn't, I keep looking at the wrong screen. Next slide. For our long-range planning, we really have to start setting some milestones. We're just having to have some things get done in a very step-by-step method. If we don't hit our objectives, we will not be able to complete the work that is dearly needed at the PUD. Next slide. This is a recycled slide too, but I've had a couple questions asked. Okay, commissioners, how are commissioners evolved? Why are we presenting this to the commissioners? In our governance policy, there are two things in it that really pertain to long-range planning. The commissioners are supposed to be focused on the future rather than the past or present. And everything we're talking about here is future development. And they're supposed to be proactive rather than reactive. If we put a positive plan together for development, it will be a proactive approach versus fixing something after the fact. So that is the reason the commissioners are here. You have your budgetary fiduciary, the money's in your bag, but it's also that long-range planning that is a big part of what you guys do for the PUD. Timelines. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the timelines on these larger projects. Engineering, for example, when we go to look at expanding a substation or building a new substation, new place, the timing takes about 6 months for just the conceptual stuff to be done. That doesn't mean anything's even decided. We get 3 or 4 conceptuals and then we move forward with that timing. Material. The transformers we're purchasing right now for substations is approximately 2 years out. If we go to the next size up, it's 4 years out. And with some of the new regulations that could be coming down for transformer construction, would even throw them another year or 2 years after that. Staffing. A lot of the timelines are dependent on the PUD responding back to engineering's, consulting's, consulting firms and that kind of stuff. And if our staff is too overworked, then we end up delaying the project, which happens quite a bit. Timelines, the need of the substation, transmission, or distribution upgrades, the need becomes part of our timeline because we need things today, but we may not be able to build them. So how do we move those options around? And then a huge part of this, and what we'll spend a lot of times on today, is financing. How do we finance long-term projects? We'll get into this a little bit later, but we're going to have to be working on projects that we don't have the financing for, which means dollars out to get a project ready so that we can go out for grants, RUS loans, loans of any kind. So those are topics that'll come up in the coming slides. Next item. So on this one, because we're in the process of doing a lot of substation work in our 4-year work plan, we're going to talk very specifically on these timeframes from when we sat down with ICPE and talked about expanding the Dana Roberts substation. It took us approximately 6 months to come up with the alternatives and how to move forward. Once that 6 months comes about, then we have to start looking at material items that are long lead times. Substation transformers are 2 years out. The high side breakers, SF6 breakers, which controls the incoming of the transmission lines, they're up to 2.5 years out, depending manufacturer. We have small items, small piece of equipment that are well over a year. So once we get conceptual drawings, it will take ICPE another 4 to 6 months to turn those conceptuals into bidding documents that we can go out for, not at this time for contractors, but for material. So then we bid out the material, and it's 2 years before we have material on site. So a 4-year plan for a substation is actually a quick turnaround. That's not a long period of time. That's a realistic time frame.
That's how long it takes to birth them.
It does. So what we're lucky, we have one transformer coming in. It's guaranteed, or we're not guaranteed. We're going to set it in at Quilcene. That's where it's needed. We're going to have to purchase transformers prior to the engineering being done. It doesn't hurt us, but those are part of the issues we're going to have to address as a group and move them forward.
You just end up designing around that size of a transformer,
You do.
basically.
And if something happens, you can always move that transformer to another location.
Mhm.
There's also, in a lot of our projects, funding. How are we going to fund it? And that's a bigger component, because until we get the drawings complete, we can't even give an estimate on, what it's going to cost. And the costs do change quite a bit, so that we may buy a transformer, put that into our budget, and then there's usually an escalator when you purchase these long lead items. For example, it may be tied to the price of copper, so that on a transformer, if the price of copper goes up in 2 years, your transformer may go from $1.5 million to $1.7 million.
Yeah, they don't want to lose money.
They're not going to lose money.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, we're not going to pay you. And they'll say, okay, the next.
Go back into the beginning of the line
They
somewhere
do.
else.
So I'm going to ask a question here. I'm going to kind of jump ahead of you a little bit.
Oh,
as
this
part of
is for the discussion.
And that is on this financing component or funding component. Do we have anybody simultaneously working on these estimated costs that we think that, these projects are going to be to determine what the rate impact is going to be on paying back those loans? I mean, obviously grants are a different story, but on particularly on loans or lines of credit or whatever, do we have someone in finance that is actually working on whatever we're proposing, looking at the financial component and what the rate impact will be? So that because we're going to have to know at some point rates are going to get so high that that's a hard stop. We can't raise the rates any higher. We can't borrow any more money. So that's, my thinking. And obviously we can go 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, whatever. I know we have room to play there, but it would make sense to me. The question is, do we have someone in finance looking at that component of this?
So, in the rate study that FCS is doing, we gave them our 4-year work plan and our estimated 10-year worth of projects. So they are putting it into the rates. What becomes a little bit of the squishiness is they're gonna say, okay, 100% of this particular project is gonna be funded by rates. And what we're recommending as staff is that we spend a lot of time and effort going after other people, grants, low interest loans. We should look at, maybe a bond. There's a lot of ways to finance this stuff that has to be added to the rates discussion. It can't be just rates.
So I guess it's a continuity issue is part of what I'm asking here, no puns intended. Would we have a single point of contact working with FCS, or is there a team working with FCS? What's the composition of how we're working with FCS to get them that information so that it's good, good info out, good info back? So that if we're changing horses in midstream, i.e. changing the plan, what's that going to do to us? We need to make sure that there's a good line of communication back and forth.
So right now, Mike Bailey and myself are the two primary contacts for FCS. Mike gives them the information, works on that kind of stuff. I primarily talk to him about our capital work projects, things we're talking about here. So that group needs to be expanded. It does, so that we continue some continuity there. But even then, what we're proposing here will change. How I'm going to recommend we move forward, we put all these projects, we sort them out, we give them a priority. And then if we get funding, we build them. If we don't, we build what we can out of rates. But I don't think it's right to put all of these projects on rates alone. It would be too costly.
No, we can't revenue finance everything that we need to do.
And it was helpful having Mike throw some numbers in there on history of our debt, and in the last 5 years. So 5 years ago, our net utility plant electric value was $20 million less. So in 5 years, our net electric plant has gone up 20 million in value, and our long-term debt went down. It's about 14 million in that same time. We went from 102 million to 88 million in principal. It's still owed. So a long-term debt.
And those are awesome numbers.
Was that just on the electric side, or was that combined utility though? I think that's just the electric side, isn't it?
It could be the electric side.
Maybe
The
not.
electric side is the vast bulk of things.
Yeah, those are phenomenal numbers to not only pay down debt, but to increase plant. The PUD for a startup has done extremely well. And we can have the same results with this as long as we're planning and we're kind of all working on the same projects. Next slide. And I may have to censor Will, but Will's going to talk a little bit about the grant timelines that we have and are working towards.
For the broadband grants?
Well, for the broadband grants, because those are known entities.
So for our main project that we're working on now, the Quilcene to Gardner Olympic Fiber Corridor in between the project, that grant timeline was extended till November of 2025. We're still trying to finish that up as quickly as we can. The next set of grants are all due in the summer of 2026. And that is the the Port Townsend Business District, Jefferson North, and the East Discovery Bay project. After that, we've got our
What was the
reconnect.
timeline on that one? Sorry.
They need to be completed by the summer of 2026.
Okay, thanks.
And then after that, a reconnect project. That grant is due 4 years after we sign the loan paperwork. I'm sorry, not after we sign the loan paperwork. We did sign the loan paperwork. After we sign the closing documents, which we have yet to sign, those will come back to the board within a month or two, I believe. We have to complete our environmental review. Is now finished, and then the next steps of doing the formal completion have to be carried out. So most likely, that'll be 4 years after 2025, which is 2029. Lead projects would be similar. If we got awards, it wouldn't be until end of 2025, and it would be likely 4 years. So not till almost 2030. The other grant loan that we have out there that we still haven't received closing paperwork for is our the Coyle Water System award to replace the water mains in that system. I believe it's a 2-year turnaround, but again, we're probably a couple months away from final documents, and the board will have the last chance to see if they want to approve that loan.
Okay.
Grant combination project.
I'm sorry, which water mains are referred to?
Coyle Water System.
Coyle?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So part of what we're talking about here, some of our timelines and some of our projects, because they're funded by other sources, we have to complete them in a certain amount of time. We've already accepted the grant, so we're going to move forward with those. Let's take the Quilcene project. When did we first apply for those grants? How long did it take us before we turned dirt out in the field?
That was an exceptionally long time. We had first applied for those in mid-2021, and we didn't turn dirt until this spring.
Wow.
So that was longer than usual. Most of them we usually have the contract within a year of the award. The awarding process was delayed 8-9 months, and then the contract took even longer.
Yeah, they were figuring out how to disperse the money. What do the contracts look like? All that stuff.
Yeah, and they had record numbers of applicants.
Yeah.
So a refresher on the reconnect. Again, we're talking about rate impacts. We're talking about revenues and all this. What was the borrow portion of that?
$4 million.
So that's another 4 million that we're going to have to figure into our cost of service rate study. It's on the broadband side of the ledger. I don't know what kind of revenues we'll generate to repay that. So again, when we look at debt, that's another piece of debt that we have to equate into the mix for how we're going to recoup the cost to cover, borrowed monies.
I hear you there, but doesn't that fall? It doesn't really fall in the rate study, or they're not looking at broadband, are they? I mean, this would fall into our broadband business plan.
Yeah, and that's
correct?
built into the broadband business plan.
So I'm saying, but if broadband can't generate the revenue, how do we deal with another, pot of money that has to be paid? Where's that going to come from? So that's my issue is taking on debt. I get that. You run a business, you take on debt, you have to leverage monies, but we need to keep in mind the full picture here. Even though we're talking about an electric work plan, there's other things that are going to impact the utility as a whole when it comes to borrowing money and how that's going to be repaid. And I think that's where the rate study, you can't just ignore it. If electric's going to end up covering that, electric has to have the money as a loan. Let's just say electric loans it to broadband.
I don't think your facts, what you're saying is the reality of what staff's working with. I think staff, we have a budget. It shows, it shows broadband, it shows their revenue, it shows the amount short, it shows how we're putting money in with property taxes.
No, but once you
the-
sign for the grant loan, you're committed to that $4 million in debt for a long period, not just a yearly budget or a 2-year budget. We're talking about a 24-year loan, I'm guessing. I don't know what the term on it was.
I guess,
It was a 20-year loan.
I guess just when you're implying that the rate study should look at that, I don't think that's the purpose of the rate study.
Well, I don't think we should ignore the rate study though, because if electric has to loan money to broadband, that's going to, that money has to come out of electric somewhere. So I'm just saying, we should keep a holistic view when it comes to debt, right? That's another pot of money that is debt that we have to keep in mind. That's my point.
Okay.
And I don't know if there is a connection between keeping that information directly involved with the rate study cost of service, but I would think that we should keep that on FCS's radar, that that's something else that we are doing.
To add a little more info into that discussion, for the broadband business plan, we needed to have 40% take rate to break even and cover our costs. We are approaching 70% in 4 of 5 grant areas. So we expect and we're already, even the reconnect area is at 43% take rate now, and we've done no advertising, and we're years from construction. So we don't anticipate any problem with meeting that revenue. It's just the timing of when we get to the revenue, because it's just taken longer to get the customers connected than we had hoped.
Yeah, on a long-term debt, you still have to maintain that tax base, so, or revenue stream, or whatever term
And
you
that
want to
the
use.
debt doesn't kick in until we actually spend the money. So we're a ways out from that.
Well, I think also, so we have a draft budget for next year, and then we do the quarterly updates. So as we do the quarterly updates, I think those are valuable opportunities to hear, okay, how are we doing on broadband? How many signups? What's our, so we will be updated as we continue. Okay. Please continue.
Understanding the funding, we have rates, we're in a rate study. We're gonna look for grants for all of our infrastructure projects, whether it's water, power, or broadband. Financing. And by financing, it could be RUS loans, it could be other ways to finance long-term projects. What the board and everyone, we need to look at, for example, if we're gonna go out for RUS loan, there's a lot of work that has to be done to put the documentation together to even get the loan through any type of approval process. Again, we're going to be engineering, working on many projects in the future that haven't been funded. So we just need to make sure that the work we're looking to do, we're all on the same page saying, yep, this is a good project. And if we don't get funding on that source, we go out and we look for another funding source.
So that's part of the purpose of today's meetings is, once again, show us these projects, show us the costs, show us the timelines, have us ask our questions, so that this is the plan you're proceeding from. And if we have issues with it, with this, this is one of the chances for us to bring those up.
And with a little tweak, I think we have to look at staffing maybe a little different. We don't have, for example, Will is our grant writer, and he is stretched as thin as he can. How do we augment some of Will's time to go after these other grants? And it's not only staff. Well, we'll get to another slide, but it's not only staff that's going to have to spend some time. A lot of this could be federally funded, or it could be state funded, and it takes the commissioners doing the Washington DC trips, doing the state stuff. That is
I booked
hard
my
work.
airfare and hotel last night, so.
So those are the kinds of things. It's not just staff. We're gonna go after big dollars. We're gonna have to sit down not only with our Congress people, but with the Secretary of the Navy, other people, so that they know what we need and we can go out for it. We had a meeting with Tom Tersh yesterday about the electrification of the ferry and what can we do with the state to make sure we can get some funding there. There's multiple things that staff and the board is going to have to work together on, and build relationships with these people to get on the agenda to get any possibility of funding. Other PUDs get funding for substation, they get funding for this. It takes a lot of time and work by everybody in this room.
Okay.
Next slide. My slides are out of order. Yeah, so next slide. As far as timing goes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the RUS loan projects. So for us to get a RUS loan, we need to have a 4-year work plan that's approved by the board, and it's approved by our GFR, and it's approved by Washington DC.
So right now, the one that they have on record for us is from,
The last one they have from us is when we bought the new building and we did the AMI meters.
okay, those were things in the plan.
Those, we amended our plan to show that.
Okay,
That process to add a meter project for roughly 4 million, 4.5 million.
Hi, Kenneth. This is Jenny Gazy.
And to add the building at 1.5, to get the paperwork through, get everything done, it took 1 year.
mm-hmm,
And that was two little things. There was no environmental, there was very little work involved. It was pretty much, we signed up and took that long to get through. So those are things, even there, a lot of times, well, specific to the REST loan, when we were back in Washington DC on one of our trips, we sat down with RUS and said, hey, you need to push this through for us, because the REST loan took over 3 years. It wasn't all on our side. A lot of it was on their side. It gets put in a pile over here, and they're as busy as we are. They don't get to that pile. But if we make the case, you got to bring us to the top of the pile.
champion.
It will get to the top. So
There's a difference between sitting in a room 2 feet away than sending emails and
Yeah.
back and forth.
and there's a lot of opportunity with Washington State loans. There's things there that we can do not only for water, but for other portions of our business. But it takes manpower, takes people to go after them. Just to monitor all the funding capabilities in itself can be a job. You know, it's amazing how we can look at all those projects and they will tie into some sort of a funding mechanism.
Yeah, I think every fall, every October, they have that meeting in Wenatchee. I didn't go this year, but they list all those
Yeah.
projects that are water, sewer, broadband, electric.
That team thing.
It's the tech team deal, yeah. It's all the agencies come together and they're required to give presentations on funding they have.
Water oriented, or was that a?
It's water, and no, it's water, electric, sewer, and broadband, so it covers everything we do. I think we should be sending somebody every year there. It's every year in October.
Next slide. And I'm bringing up a couple projects here, appropriation, and that's both federal and state. Last time we were back in Washington DC, we gained a lot of traction for a couple projects for the Navy. But then we kind of went cold. And so a lot of the traction we had approximately a year ago, we've lost that traction. It takes staff to make sure we don't lose what we gain through these trips. And specific to the Navy, they will help us, they'll work on things, but it's primarily going to be our fight. The PUD is going to have to take the lead. They will help us, but our base isn't like Bang or some of the others where they can just make it happen. We need to do a lot of the work ourselves.
Is there going to be a change in command on the island? Where are we at with that relationship?
We used to be, always knew who the new commander was, would see him at different meetings, stuff like that. They change approximately every 2 years, 18 months. I have met the commander one time, but there is no relationship there.
So is that the first step going back, getting back into the flow is there, or do we need to go to regional command? I know we talked about DC. What is the litany there of how we have to move forward?
So specifically with the Navy, Will has been meeting with the Navy a little bit on some other items. A lot of times, we as staff need to start a little bit lower than the commander, get a good working relationship with some of the people that actually run the base. They're long-term employees. They've been there for years. And that's where we can build a really good relationship that they then can go to the commander and say, hey, we have a good relationship with the PUD, and move those forward. So now we're gonna look at some very specific electric projects. And this is in our 2025 budget. And if you start going down through these projects, there's not a one that isn't needed. They all have to be done. It becomes, in what order do you do them? The Mill Road substation, the $3 million that we're showing on the work plan, that's the very top line on the thing. That's design work and a little site prep. That's purchasing the property, it's engineering, it's getting it surveyed. It would do the logging of the property. It would build some roads in there. It's just the very start of what needs to be done of a 4-year project. Now, depending on how everything goes, you could say, okay, we're not going to put the 3 million in there, but we need to spend at least 1.5. And those are the discussions that'll come in future meetings. When we're talking, and part of these will hit a little bit later, the Chimicum feeders. When we talk about the Chimicum feeders, that's to build the underground lines to Indian Island and Maristone. Huge project. That's a priority. The problem we've ran into, we've been working on that project for over 2 years. The last year is to get the last piece of permitting to bore underneath the creek to get everything to Indian Island. That phase is completed now, so that we're gonna have to set this as a priority to start the underground construction coming out of the sub, going through Shoals upper pit, and build that. Quilcene sub, we're estimating 1.5 million for Quilcene sub. Again, that's engineering preliminary work. It's expanding the fence, but it doesn't get us the substation. Substations are in future years.
Do these costs weigh into account the plan you had for jumbling things around, moving pieces and parts from one station to the next? Are those costs included in these?
They are, but they're estimates. I think specifically to the transformer shuffle, we met with ICPE yesterday. We're going to be close on those costs. That we may be a pinch over in one substation, but maybe a little bit less. We're going to have to do some foundation work in Quilcene we weren't planning on. But then for Dana Roberts, we found some equipment where we're not going to have to purchase it. We can use our own equipment. So there may be enough of an offset there where we're going to.
So you've approached the cost side of it. So the way you've prioritized these, I'm assuming that the plan that you're pushing here is to continue with the shuffle of the substations, or no?
The transformer.
or transformer, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna push forward with the transformer swap out. It buys us not only time, it keeps our costs down so we can build revenue. And right now, to build revenue is gonna be key for all these projects. For example, if you remember at Quilcene, we're gonna take the small transformer out, put the new one on. If we don't do that, if we just take the new transformer and set it on cribbing, it will be 3 or 4 years till it's ever energized. So we're gonna try to keep our costs as small as possible, but optimize the equipment we'll have on hand.
One other quick question, a little bit off to the side of this, is are we tracking the development within the county? I.e., I know there's housing being built in the Port Ludlow area. I know there's the 150 units that Habitat's going to build in Hadlock. Is this plan taking into account these larger construction projects that are going on in the county for housing in particular?
So if you look at the housing in Port Hadlock, for example, we have to complete the feeders out of Chimicum substation so that we can split the load better there. So yes, we looked at that. What a little bit is, and I think we'll be okay there because that project is a little bit further behind. What's gonna hurt us a little bit is the new substation out of by the paper mill. That's needed today, and it's just not gonna happen. So if we can get Dana Roberts, the second bay, up and running, even though it's kind of cobbled together, that will give us the leeway to feed the Port Townsend homes, the new hospital expansion. There's quite a bit going on there.
Okay.
So on future meetings, we'll discuss some things here. A couple things that are lower on the list that will take a priority are the SCADA work. We have to be able to optimize the equipment in the field, the substations. The only way to do that is bring all the information and have control at our fingertips. So we will put a big push for the SCADA systems. We are going to start utilizing some of the fiber that's being installed for the broadband. These are things that we can use that'll going to save us money and give us connections that we've really lacked in the past. So
Who's our SCADA person now that Colton is no longer with us?
David is.
Okay.
And he and I met. He's excited about some of the new things we have to do. Basically, we built our SCADA system 10 years ago, and we haven't done a lot with it. We need to say, okay, it's 10 years old. It's time to upgrade. It's time to put some money and time in it. And they are very time consuming to get a lot of this done. It's building a wide area network, which again, we're getting network people. We have things going on. So we're excited for a lot of this work.
And are some of our broadband people able to help us with construction of SCADA equipment?
We don't have enough people in our SCADA department. So yes, we're going to rely on the network people of the broadband team to really put us to the next level on SCADA.
Okay.
That's our hope.
Okay.
There's next slide. So the next slide is our 4-year work plan that we're going to turn into RUS. What quickly I'm going to go through is what the numbers really mean. So 201, it says underground feeders out of Irondale Bay 2. We need that project, and in a nutshell, we're going to build new underground feed from this site up Discovery Bay to where it splits at the golf course. We need 2 circuits there, one to go one way, one to go the other, so that we can carry more load out of Irondale towards the Cape George area. 202, the feeders out of Port Ludlow substation, that's the Breaker Lane. We have $1 million set aside for that project. Breaker Lane during peak conditions is troublesome for us. So the new feed out of there not only will help Breaker Lane, but it will take some load off of Chimicum substation, which gives us a little bit better capabilities on the new development at Hadlock. The next one that really is going to take priority is 204. These are the new feeders out of Chimicum substation, and that is the new express feeder for the Indian Island and Marrowstone Island. Now, these dollars are based on available funds. Some work on these three projects will be completed. It may not be all of the work, but what the funds we do have available, they will be going towards those three projects.
So this is the need, but it's not fully funded.
Not yet,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
there's opportunity out there.
Okay.
Next.
Kevin, what is the $2.4 million represent in that last box, since it's clearly not a total?
I'm not sure where you're
Bottom right
talking. Oh,
corner.
far right,
Previous, far right.
bottom.
The green new line distribution, mainline construction says 2.4 million on the far right.
Yeah, I'm saying the formula is not working correctly because it should be a total. And it should be the 4-year total. So we'll fix that, Ken. Thank you.
Got it, thank you.
It's just, it's catching the upper one.
Okay, the next slide. 401, the new substation Mill Road. For where we set in the future, that has to take effect sooner than later. That's a priority. We have 3 million there. If we can all come to agreement, that would take the bulk of what money we do have towards this station. The hard part is we do have a bid document to go out for bid for the transformer. We'll do those kind of things. I think we'll be close to the $11 million range. We did have a meeting though with the paper mill folks. They have new management. They may want to change some of the configuration. So that means we'd go back to engineering, have to reconfigure that. It would add probably 4 months to our engineering, which we really don't have. And so I'm not sure how fast Mill Road will be engineered, but it has to be one of our #1 priorities.
So you're saying 12 million is the total need for the 4-year plan, right? Am I hearing that number right? And then we have 3 million available for the mill project in this year already. So is that 9 million more we need, or?
No, for the new substation, if Bill, based on the conceptuals we have today, I need a total of $11.9 million. If we change the transmission side of things, and that's where the paper mill wants to work with us, we would add probably $2 to $3 million to that project, but it would give us some switching capabilities on the transmission side. So that if one transmission line failed, we would open and close breakers automatically to keep the line on to Port Townsend into the paper mill. So it's a great plan, but it is, originally we were just going to tie our transmission line in, not theirs. More capability really in this case just means more money, but we'd have to work something out with the port. But
You mean the mill or the
I
port?
mean the mill, excuse me.
And you mentioned new management at the mill. Is that new since this summer, or you're just referring to them as kind of,
No, new since 2 weeks ago.
oh my gosh,
Yeah, whole new group of people.
oh boy.
Okay, next page. Again, 504, 505, we've talked about those in our 4-year work plan. And this is what will go to RUS on these particular ones. That's a funding source, but it also gives us a guideline to what we're gonna spend. These would be lesser priorities. Quilcene primarily because we'll set the new transformer in as soon as possible, which increases the output there. And then Port Ludlow, the substation is important, but the feeder is more important than the station at this time. If you look the next page, we're looking at 700.004 SCADA equipment. This is a little bit different pot of money. And so we've added 300,000 for SCADA work in the 4-year work plan. We hope that we have funding for this. If we don't, we would concentrate on the field equipment and not the master stations. Part of that, we're running fiber by a lot of key equipment. If I can tie into that fiber, it just gives me so much better capabilities, not only of analyzing what's going on our system, but moving load around. During outages, the dispatchers can say, hey, I can throw this switch in and pick up this area and literally monitor the voltage at the regulators at the substation down to the home at the meter once we get everything working in our favor. Next slide. This one's a little bit different. Specifically, we want to look at 1002 Irondale substation transmission relay replacements. We're not sure what this is going to fit in, but part of this is for our fire mitigation plan. We have the oldest Schweitzer relays they make in our Irondale transmission station. When they first came out, they called them the 100 series relays. That lasted just a couple years, and then they went to a 200 series relay. I wouldn't say that's 92. Schweitzer's been in business since 89, something like that. So it's been a long time. Great relays. They still work. They do what it's supposed to, but the technology has come about to a huge, it's just changed. It's like a Model A to a Ferrari. It's that much of a change. So not that they're not working properly, they are. It's just for fire mitigation to trip the lines out quicker, to sense some of the things that they can do today we couldn't do back then is what's driving part of that relay upgrade. That particular upgrade, Will kind of looked at it as part of the grant for the monies to underground Marrowstone Island. I think it fell out, but there's money available for this type of fire mitigation.
I poked into a meeting that Will and Jameson and Melanie were at, the BPA energy efficiency workshop. And I was there for like literally 5 minutes, but in that 5 minutes, one of the things they said was, depending on what you're doing, sometimes some of this work results in energy efficiency because the equipment you're putting in has less resistance or can carry more power. And a portion of it could be funded by our BPA energy efficiency funds. But I don't know how true that is for us, because don't we use the whole thing every year?
We do use all of it for customers, but I am going to look into, they specifically called out transformer installations. So we may find some savings. I don't think they're very large,
right?
But there may be some options available for us
to help a little bit.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. This is kind of the end of this of a 4-year work plan. Since this 4-year work plan was put together 3 months ago, we have added a couple items, very specific for fire mitigation. With our curtailment plan, when you shut down power, there's certain things you have to do, can do, and need to do. So we are modifying this so that, and these are examples. During red flag warnings, we will change the settings on our relays so that the circuit opens up, doesn't close back in. So you have less of an arc. The problem becomes you have to then drive the whole line out before you can energize it. And the limb or whatever caused the problem has gone away. So you spend hours trying to find things, and then you try to turn it back on, and hopefully you found it or you didn't. They make like fault indicators so that you put the fault indicators on the line. They're fairly easy to do, but expensive, time consuming to get up and on. But they can come back to SCADA. They can help direct the crews to say, okay, we can energize all the way to this switch because the fault indicators tell us.
Mhm.
They go to there, and then they're only patrolling the second half of the line. There's a lot of equipment like that. Better relays at the reclosures that will help with our fire mitigation. So we are modifying this a little bit, trying to get in some of that equipment for us. And how our US works is if it's not on your 4-year work plan, you can't borrow money. And so, not that we're going to borrow money. We may not, but it is an option. So we're trying to get as much things that are realistically can be done on this plan.
I like how you're looking at things from different perspectives, because that's often the way things get funded at the legislature or Congress. They'll get all worried about fire, and then they'll provide a bunch of money for fire prevention. And if, things fall into our bucket that would help us deal with that, it might make, parts of the project fundable that way, or, resiliency is another one they talk about, or whatever. It's like, okay, how do we look at what we need to do in terms of the boxes that they're identifying funding for?
Okay. Next slide. We won't spend much time on this page. This is broadband. This is what we have spent or will spend in 2025. It is kind of a moving target. We have a couple projects that we aren't going to finish up in time, so those monies will jump to 2025. But we have a couple jobs that we're going to start later in the year that we may try to expedite, which means we'll spend a little bit more money there. But these are funded projects. These are obligations we have, and we have to complete them in a time frame. Next slide. This is water. We have a $3.6 million budget. There are 3 main projects we are talking about. Coil mainline replacement at 2.6. That is a loan grant. If everything goes well, we would like to be working on that in 2025. Probably won't spend the 2.6 all in 2025. I'll probably move over to the next year. Snow Creek, and these are based on numbers put together years ago. Snow Creek Power, the Snow Creek replacement building, total costs on our 10-year work plan were approximately $50,000. We're $350,000 into it today. We will continue to finish that up in 2025. This 8,000 is going to be much closer to about 45,000, but we have to complete that. That building, the site was terrible.
It was bad.
It was
I
bad.
saw it before they began.
And so we have put the new building on. If you remember, the building was bought during COVID, and then it's just been a fiasco. That project has to be finished up, and it will be. we were hoping to get it done in 2024, but it won't. It will be 2025. And then the other thing that, and we've talked about this a little bit with the board, we need some SCADA upgrades. Right now, a lot of the information at the well house, for example, the meters that read for the water being pumped out of the well, they don't automatically come to us. We send people out. Some do, some don't. We need to make sure we have better controls. I was talking to Jose 2 days ago, and on the coil, for example, we can have notification that there's the line broke, the water line broke. So we get notification on the phone, and then we can control the valve and turn it off. What we need to be able to do is have a PLC and have the control in the pump house that when they sense this type of fault, that it automatically happens. We can drain a tank in a matter of hour, and it takes us 15 minutes to respond. So if the tank's already low. So we also believe that with our new fiber deployment, a lot of the water tanks right now work on a cell signal, that we can bring that back. It's a little more secure. There's some things that would really benefit us to bring them back via the new fiber system. Now, in the 10-year water plan, we had a lot of things that were $7,320. We're talking probably $73,200. But those are things we will come back to the board as we develop our plans, but that has to take a real priority for the 2025 calendar year. It will help us also with a lot of our compliance with the state and some of the other people that we deal with. Next slide. This is our approved water plan. And I bring this up. You have to have projects on the water plan to get it funded by the state. So we put a lot of projects on here, and a lot of them were carries over from the past water plan. As we hire some new people, the water plan needs to be revised. We need to put better numbers there and actually put a little different projects that we've identified lately that we need to complete. So the water plan for the water will come back to the board. It's got to be board approved, then it goes to the state, but our water plan will need to be revised.
Is this water plan what you were working on with the county, or is that a different issue than what we were working on with the county to coordinate?
So that great segue. One of the reasons we need to get our water system plan revised as soon as possible is because the county is starting to work on the county water plan, which pretty much takes everybody's water plan, water providers, their plan, and puts a comprehensive plan for the county together. So two different things, but we will work closely with the county on the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Real quick, and I bring this project up because we've all been hearing we're going to run out of power, our high water mark, all of these kind of things. I think our hydro generation is a very needed project here, but this is one that has to be funded. You know, we've put the cost estimate up to 28 million. We've changed the load from 3 megawatts to 5. We can do this, but the funding has to come from either the state or the federal government. I think we have good, there's a lot of funding out there for these exact type of projects. It's just going to take a lot of work. But I am gonna push hard to keep it in our long-range planning, that it is something that we need to do. We have a small $200,000 grant that we're working with the engineers for feasibility. What that really means is with that document, we can use it to go out to find money.
So you talked about the change in leadership or management at the mill. You know, the mill is the number one component of this at the end of the day. If they don't allow us or sign some sort of agreement that we can commit on, the funding won't come. I don't see that. So where are we with that relationship and the mill's willingness to sign on so that we don't get midstream in this and have them pull the rug out from under us and say, well, no, you can't do this any longer. So how's that work? What kind of contract agreement do we need? Or mutual operating agreement or whatever the term may be with the mill so that we can really pursue this short-term or long-term.
And it's the mill and the city. 'Cause it's-
Well, I see the city as being less problematic. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I think this is something that the city would definitely be on board with because it's local. The
Mhm.
mill in a lot of ways is owned from outside. So that's why I'm focusing on the mill in particular.
So how I am looking at it, because I do have concerns with, the long range plan of the mill and the PUD to make sure we have that relationship built. No matter what happens, right now there's 12 million gallons a day going through the pipeline. I'll do the extreme. If the city went away, you could still put 12 million gallons of water through the pipeline. So it would not necessarily affect our plans because the water is there, it's available. Now,
I think you meant to say if the mill wasn't operating.
or mill or city, either one.
Either one.
Either one goes away, the water still goes through the pipeline.
Yeah.
The pipeline's built, the collection system's there.
I'm just looking at how funders would look at this as to the reliability of the project due to the flow of the water and who controls that. Ultimately, we have to have some sort of very long-term agreement in place to make sure that we have access to that flow. Or they're not going to give us any money for the project.
The city owns the water and the pipeline. That is contractual with the mill. Now, so as long as the city's there, really, we can contract with them for the water. It's no different than the mill contracting with the water. It's a little different because you pay for part of the kilowatt hours, there's things like that.
Again, my question still remains, if we're going to, even as a midterm or long-term project, what is our communication with those two entities, the city and the mill, to get some sort of a guarantee in writing, I would think, so that we can get the access to the funding from the state or the federal government? Because without that, I don't see them giving us any money.
Will and I,
Can I comment on this? I mean, I think, you can move forward on plans without having secured final agreements. And I think it's, you have to my experience anyway, you have to, talk with everybody, but it's not like you're going to get a signed water rights agreement from the city before you have funding in place. And the funding would be contingent on having those things.
Yeah, Kevin.
sure.
Yeah, that's what the purpose of the feasibility study is for, Dan, so that we can have those conversations and review the initial preliminary engineering with those other parties.
Joel used the right word there at the end, and that was contingency. So that's the word I see. I can see how this process can work then to get the funding.
So I'm just doing a time check. I'm guessing the executive session is probably going to want to run 40 minutes or so. I don't know.
We can go right to questions.
Okay.
We went through that pretty quick. We'll focus in very specific in future meetings, but one of the takeaways that I'm hoping we focus in on is, I believe, to get the funding we need, Will is going to be a key component there. We need to get Will some help. We need to free up some of his time because Will has been on the broadband more successful than anyone else that I know of to getting money for the PUD. The thinking is he can be just as successful with water, with power, to get us money coming into the PUD. So we are gonna look at a focus a little bit different, try to get Will not only resources to help with grants, but getting resources to help with broadband, with some of his other duties, because let's be frank, he has got the PUD over $60 million for broadband.
Yeah.
That's the expertise we can build on for moving forward.
Great. Commissioners, more questions or discussion?
Well, I think we've asked a lot of good questions and we're trying to vet as much of this as we can. And I don't see at this point, any reason to not doubt staff's proposals on moving and the general manager's proposals on this plan to move forward at this point. So far, everything seems to be making sense as to a path that we can take to move forward, to try and accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Okay, Ken?
Yeah, I think it's a very ambitious plan, obviously needed, contingent on a lot of outside funding. I don't have any reservations about going forward, but obviously we need to move incrementally as the money becomes available, and to Commissioner Tupper's point, to be cognizant about how much debt we're taking on. On the other hand, when you're talking about huge investments in infrastructure that are supposed to last many decades, I don't have a problem with doing debt financing paid off over a number of years. We're increasingly limited in terms of what we can fund with direct revenue. So good presentation. I don't have any further comments or questions.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate you recognizing that there's money out there. I mean, this is a time when the federal and the state government have been putting a lot of money out for infrastructure. So I appreciate you recognizing that and trying to help bring more money to us from out of the county. And so we may hear at some point about some help that you might get. Will. That sounds great. Do we have any public comments or questions on any of this? We got one member here.
Only the observation that there's a lot, I know there's a lot to go on. There'll be a lot of other meetings. I certainly have some questions, but I know Dan asked some very good questions, very pointed questions there, which answered what I see right now. But I know that going down the road, there will be more, so.
Okay. Anybody else online have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. In the plan, there are a lot of items that are been listed or identified in the conversation as we got to do this. These are high priority, essential kinds of projects. The thing that is missing a little bit is, what if they don't get done? What are the consequences of not doing some of these things? Because if you look at the risk reward ratio, I think the rewards are vast, but the risks are also pretty great, I think, for some of these things if they don't get done. And so maybe a discussion of that topic, not necessarily quantifying it, but just a conversation about, well, this is really important because ... Not questioning the importance of the things, just would like some information about, how bad could things get? So that's my comment and or question. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And that's kind of the flip side of the coin. The spending your money, the opportunity is to make things better. And we've kind of had some of those dire conversations about, over this year since January, of areas where we're short. And we oftentimes talk about water systems that are losing water. And so, yeah, we didn't really talk about the dire, but staff seems like they can go into that mode when we need them to.
We can bring what happens if we don't do these projects. You don't have water, you don't have power or sewer.
Kevin and I tease each other all the time. I'm the glass half empty. Kevin's the glass half full. So we have these discussions when we have our one-on-ones a lot. I appreciate Commissioner Collins. I wished I could sleep as well as he does because I always have reservations. I'm always, what's that one thing that I'm overlooking? What is it that I don't know that I don't know? What question should I have asked? So
Okay.
congratulations.
What,
Sleep well, Commissioner.
what makes you think I sleep that well?
Hey, guys. So it's 12:17. Is staff done?
Yep.
Did you get what you needed from us today? Yeah. And I concur. It's a great list. Please keep us posted. I think as we do, whether it's the quarterly budget or whatever, I think coming back and touching on things and keeping us updated as to how things are going. And if we have additional resources to go after grants, let us know, helps us communicate too, as Dan pointed out. Okay. So the next item on our next topic is an executive session per RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 subsection G to review the performance of a public employee. And I'm just guessing we're going to go to that 12:55 stop mark that Ken has. So that's roughly, can't do the math, 37 minutes or something till 12:55. Okay, we are now going into executive session. We finished, this is Jeff Randall, president of the board of the Jefferson PUD. We have finished our executive session just a little bit early. It is 12:49 and we have reached the end of our agenda and there's no more business. So we are now adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.